An older runner near the end of his life once told me his biggest, best memories of his life were his school graduations, his wedding, the birth of his children, and when he completed the New York City Marathon. At first, I thought this was a little dramatic. Why would a marathon be up there with everything else? Then in 2021, I completed the same marathon and I knew what he was talking about. It was through the marathon that I could see everything around me and realize I could accomplish anything I wanted to do. Hello, welcome. I'm Jane, and I post videos a couple times a week. And if there's anything you're interested in seeing more of or less of, just let me know, and I'm totally open to your feedback and suggestions. This video will cover my lack of running background, the training plan, how the race day went, and what I managed to accomplish in the 2.5 years after the race. As background, I have always hated running my entire life. Running the mile in school was the worst activity for me, worse than gymnastics, worse than falling over when I tried to do a cartwheel. It was just the most painful thing, and I realized in 8th grade that I had exercise-induced asthma. But on top of that, the idea of doing a long run seemed insane because I also have always struggled with anxiety and depression, and so if I'm not distracted for a long period of time, I can just get into negative thought patterns and start feeling stuck. So the idea of doing a long run or training for a marathon had always seemed impossible. I'd basically just be clutching my chest in pain and thinking about sad things. But in 2019, I went to Central Park to see a few of my friends run the marathon. I was especially in particular shocked and impressed by my friend Dave because not only did he complete the race with exercise-induced asthma and go through his whole training plan, he also completed the race in a pretty good time, around 4 hours and 30 minutes. And he ran the race for a charity called Restore NYC, which rescues victims of sex trafficking. So this is a cause that's very important to me, and I was so inspired by Dave that I promised myself that one day soon I would complete the race no matter what it took. I would also raise money for that charity, and hopefully I would beat him a little bit at his time. The training journey started with zero knowledge on my part. All I knew is I needed running shoes. I had pretty much no experience running except being in pain in school. I struggled to run even half a mile without gasping for air, and then I would just sadly walk home. I could not even imagine running 3 miles or 4 miles or 5 miles, and the whole thing just seemed ridiculous. Dave gave me a wealth of running knowledge, and then he connected me with Jeff, and then the three of us had a group chat on Facebook, and we talked about running nonstop every single day for the entire time that I was training, before and after as well, since they're both much more runners than I am. And we looked at the Hal Higdon website. I downloaded a free training plan, the easiest one I could find. And then we stumbled upon the Maffetone method, which helps you calculate a heart rate range that you want to stick to when you do your long runs. That helped me build my aerobic system and endurance, and also helped me prevent injury. Running in that lower heart rate range also helped me gravitate towards healthier foods rather than unhealthy foods, but I'm not sure why there is a connection. But that's what the Maffetone method teaches, and it seemed to be going the way that it was written in the book. And then, very gratefully, my brother gave me a Garmin watch for my birthday, which I realized was way more useful than an Apple Watch for running, just because if my hands were sweaty, I could still press the buttons. And also it was very light and easy to use. And I ended up uploading a lot of my runs to Strava using my Garmin watch at the time. As you can see, already in the beginning of the training plan, without even really adding miles yet, I realized that I could definitely not do this without the people around me. I also tried out group runs to make new friends and have a sense of community. I was very, very lonely at that time of my life. But unfortunately, that didn't really work out for me because when I went to the group runs, I felt pressure to run faster than other people. But the whole point of a long run is that you have to stay at a very slow and sustained pace to train that aerobic system. So I ended up just not even going to group runs anymore and doing every single run alone. And that also minimized the travel time before and after the run so that I could maximize my recovery time. Meaning I basically become a lonely marathon training hermit for a long time. The first milestone I had was just being able to run 1 mile without stopping. And then once I reached 5 miles without stopping, I realized that I could just explore New York and Jersey City, and that was really fun for me because it felt like I could see a new part of the city and new streets and bridges and buildings that I had never really noticed before. And it made me really appreciate where I was living just because I was pretty much forced to change my routes and didn't want to do the same exact run every single day. So that was a really cool exercise and benefit that I didn't expect. I ran into Liberty State Park, which ended up being my favorite place in the world. You can see Jersey City, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Staten Island, and much more, all from exactly the same place where you're standing. So a lot of Sunday mornings, for some reason, Sundays, I was especially lonely. I would just go to that park and spend time in nature, and that was always a really beautiful experience. And my next milestone before the marathon, ironically, wasn't actually when I passed the half marathon mark or when I did my 20-mile runs, which were really important, but it was when I did a 10-mile run across 5 bridges. Starting in the financial district, I ran across the Brooklyn Bridge, Manhattan Bridge, Williamsburg Bridge, Pulaski Bridge, and Queensboro Bridge all in the same day, and that was in a very cold part of February one year, and I was very thankful for the mental resilience and grit that I had built over the months of running. Unfortunately, I actually started that run already injured and learned the painful lesson that running on injury definitely makes the injury worse. And so after that, for many different weeks when I was injured, I had to just completely stop running for a week at a time and found that not running was actually even harder because I felt like I wasn't making progress. So I had to remind myself that my body was recovering, it would come back even stronger, and then I could keep going. The race was the first Sunday of November in 2021, and I had practiced down to every tiny aspect multiple times, down to the exact haircut, shirt, underwear, shorts, socks, shoes, gels for nutrition, music playlist. I tested everything multiple times before the race day. I also watched every single New York City Marathon training video on YouTube I could possibly find to help close gaps in my preparation or my understanding. And the night before, I was wide awake, totally scared and nervous and excited. I heard that's totally normal if you put in a lot of effort into something and you're just really excited to see what will happen.
Hey Jane, just wanted to say good luck tomorrow and you're gonna do great. We love you. Have a great time.
Bye.
Woke up very early, 4 or 5 a.m., Ubered to New York Public Library.
It's gonna be a beautiful day.
Got on a bus, went to Staten Island, and froze for hours on the island. I had little heat packs stuck to my body all over. I saw a lady shivering, so I gave her one of them, and I wish I had even given her more. But the other regret is that I also didn't spend enough time in the porta potties because I thought it was a little weird to just stand in a porta potty, but there were a lot of them open and no one was using them. And I could have probably just stood there to protect myself from the cold winds. I also accidentally walked through some wet grass and it moved my sock around in my shoe, but I didn't realize until the race. It was really, really painful throughout the whole race. Since it was so cold, when the sun finally started coming out, I sat with my back against a tree, partially to sit in the sun and partially because I was so exhausted that morning that I could really barely sit up without being helped by the tree. I met someone when I was waiting and hung out with her before the race, and that was also really fun just to talk to someone who had also been in the same exact experience, training for all those months and being really excited to run the race for the first time. I could hear the cannons going off in the distance as the first couple waves started, and then finally it was my turn. So mile 1 began and we crossed the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, which is really a huge bridge. I stuck with a pace group that was running around a 4-hour, 10-minute time for the marathon. It was a little faster than what I was expecting to run for, but I wanted to be pushed a little, and they were amazing. So we crossed into Brooklyn pretty quickly and then spent a long time in Brooklyn. The crowds really cheer the most in Brooklyn by far, and it was very, very easy. Also, because of all the training, the first 13 miles was pretty much a breeze, and I could feel pain building up in my body, but it was a low level pain, and I just tried to focus on keeping my eyes straight up and pumping my arms and keeping my feet light and quick. So at 13 miles, halfway through the race, we crossed the small Pulaski Bridge into Queens. Then, after not long, we crossed the Queensboro Bridge, which, although it's not the biggest bridge in the race, it is the biggest mentally. When you cross the Queensboro Bridge, it's very silent, and you realize just how much the loud crowds had numbed the physical pain in your body. So pain started rushing into my body by the time we got across that bridge, and I just tried to focus on getting up that slope. And then once we started going downhill, we could start to hear the roars of Manhattan. We ran up straight north for a while, all the way to the Bronx. I stuck with my pace group for as long as possible, but I started to sense that I was going to enter the pain cave and my body was going to run out of glycogen. So around mile 20 to 22, I experienced the worst part of the race, which is when my body was switching fuel sources, and I could not have prepared for that moment. It was beyond painful, and every endurance runner who runs long distances knows this well. It is like hitting a wall, and now I will describe it to you a little bit. I felt like there were knives stabbing into my thighs. My entire body was cramping up. Mentally, I believed fully that I was just foolish for running this race, that I should just walk along the side of the road, sit down, and give up. And then, in that moment of greatest hopelessness, I remembered my friends Adam and Talisa, who told me that that moment would come. It's totally normal and it's going to pass. Because my brain wasn't really working well, the only thing I could remember was to just get the medal, finish strong, and don't give up. So I continued south from the Bronx and finally reached familiar Central Park. I knew it was only a matter of time before I crossed the finish line. And so I did. And in that moment, it felt like I had just lived in the most beautiful movie of all time. I was smiling and laughing through my tears, and there was a sea of blue ponchos because all of the finishers were given this blue poncho to keep you warm. And that day we knew that those blue capes meant superheroes. That was late 2021. Fast forward to today, and in this short period of time, I've experienced more personal growth than I could have ever hoped for. The most obvious changes were physical. By the end of the training plan, my body had become a tank, my chest had shrunk, my abs had widened to almost the width of my hips, and my legs were extremely muscular like tree trunks, and I felt like I could get anywhere in any amount of time and never stop running. Although it wasn't my favorite physical form personally, I realized that I had been very hard on my body and my body image for a long time, and suddenly I was so grateful for my body and respected it for what it could do, and totally in awe that it could turn into a powerhouse at will just because I had worked on it. I've been much more respectful towards my body and nicer to it when it doesn't look how I want it to look, and that's definitely been transformative for my body image. On the other hand, I suddenly had a lot of free time again because I had stopped pretty much all of my hobbies and social activities just to focus on training. I suddenly felt like my calendar was a blank slate and I could fill anything I wanted onto it, and I was forced to just very intentionally think about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to spend my time. The first thing I realized is that many of my close friends were either not right for me, or rather, I wasn't the right friend for them. So I ended up saying goodbye to a few of my friendships and continuing others, and that dramatically changed my sense of loneliness. I realized I was in some of the wrong friend groups, and that was more of why I was lonely rather than there being a real problem. And so it was a very difficult transition to shift groups that I was hanging out with, but it ended up really helping. And I realized that sometimes when I don't belong somewhere, that's more of why I feel lonely rather than having to completely change who I was in an instant. There was change that was sorely needed though. So as I became more free and even a little bored because I didn't know how to fill my time, I suddenly realized that I really needed to start dating again. But I realized that one of my biggest phobias in life is actually dating. And the idea of being in a long relationship just completely terrified me. And I would say that that fear was actually way deeper and more difficult to deal with than my fear of running. A couple years after the marathon, I found myself in an amazing relationship with my best friend and now husband. But the pain of being in that relationship, just having to be in any relationship, was 10,000 times worse than being in a marathon. And to paint a picture, there were 2 weeks in my relationship dating my now husband where I lost about 15 pounds from just being afraid of dating, and I almost lost him completely. I ended up finding a specialist who gave me an amazing evidence-based therapy plan, and through many months, a bit like a training plan for a marathon, over and over every single day, I completed my homework and I tried to focus on my goal, which was to be healthier. In the worst, most painful parts, my mom always reminded me of mile 22 of the marathon and how I could get through anything, even if I didn't think that I would. Because of the marathon, by that, I could see everything else. I could see that I could do anything and I could conquer anything. And although I haven't completely gotten through my relationship phobia, and to this day I still struggle with it a bit, I think that being in that marathon taught me that I really could conquer that phobia and I could really find a husband, get married, and live a beautiful life with my best friend. If you ever decide to run a marathon, just know that it's going to be amazing because you will realize how amazing you are. You'll see how strong you are when you have to climb up a massive bridge and you're so annoyed that it's there. You'll see how resilient you are when you're hungry, tired, thirsty, or uncomfortable. And you'll see how smart and capable and innovative you are if you need to get through the training plan, solve the problems you may encounter, and also finish in the time that you want. The biggest tip I have is just to remember that you are not alone. You're never alone. No matter what your goal is, whether it's running a marathon or something else, just know that there are so many resources online and in person who are going to be available to help you. And they are out there, and you can solve whatever problem or goal you want to figure out. Running a race, especially a marathon, because it's so long, is an analogy for life's journey. Fellow runners are the people in your life who join your life for different amounts of time in different ways. The millions of spectators are like the universe reminding you you're not alone, you're not alone. And the medal is your biggest dreams fulfilled and achieved, and crossing the finish line is when you realize that you've lived a full life. Thank you so much for watching this channel. We passed the 75 subscriber count, which means that I am so honored and flattered that you would want to watch my videos and see more of them. And I will continue to make the best videos that I possibly can for you. Wherever you are in life, just know I'll always be your friend and I will always cheer for you and support you. Now, before we go, I will leave you with a beautiful quote written by Liz Robbins, who wrote A Race Like No Other, which is about the New York City Marathon. They all have a reason why they participate in the race, whether they run to live or they live to run. They run with mothers and fathers, with brothers and sisters, with husbands and wives, or they run with their memories. They come to outrun their demons and their diagnoses. They run with members of a team, sometimes tethered to a blind runner by a shoestring. They race on wheels if they cannot run. They run to check it off the life list. They run to eat cake or to chase vanity. They run to suffer so others will not. They run because they cannot stop running. They run to win. And at the end of the day, at the end of 5 bridges and 5 boroughs and 26.2 miles, they will have run because it is New York and they are not alone. Thank you for watching, guys.